intersection of law and everyday life. We strive to cover it all, help you get your business right. At the corner of legal insight and understanding, we hope to keep your knowledge ever expanding. Welcome to Law Street with GHR. We got law education accessible to all. Oh, welcome to Law Street with GHR. We're informing the community, so come and get involved.
Hello everyone and welcome to Law Street, at the intersection of law and everyday life. I'm Lisa Rooms and I have with me my partner Gabrielle Grant-Gilpin-Hudson.
Hi everybody.
Gabrielle, what are we going to be talking about today?
Okay, so today I figured we could give a quick guide to buying Jamaican real estate.
Yes. Okay, so if you're a buyer of Jamaican real estate, what are some of the things and the considerations you should be looking at?
Okay, so basically I think the first thing that you need to get straight is to know your goal. So how much real estate or property can you afford?
Right.
So I think the first step is to really say, okay, what is my source of funds? Am I purchasing with a mortgage? Am I purchasing with cash? If I'm purchasing with a mortgage, have I spoken to a mortgage officer to know what I'm pre-qualified to borrow? Meaning they can do a little interview with you. You take them through like how much you're making per month, what your expenses are, if you have any other loans, and they are able, based on that information, to give you an idea of what you can afford.
Okay. What should you be looking at when you're actually looking at the property?
Right. So the next thing I would say is that you really want to search and choose wisely. You want to get like an idea of what your wish list is, what is it that you want in the property, what area, you know, whether it's a residence,
right,
whether it's a vacation stay,
right,
an income generator, you know, a commercial property. All of these things you need to have straight in your head, right? So you can search for properties in Jamaica through a number of different mediums,
right,
including local newspapers in the classifieds, or you could work with a realtor, somebody that's licensed by the real estate board. And, you know, if they are a realtor, they would have access to the Realtors Association of Jamaica's MLS, what's that? Multiple Listings Service, which basically has a long list of properties for sale,
right,
across the island, different price points, different, you know, numbers of bedrooms, etc. So that's where I would say maybe want to start your property search.
Okay. And I know that a lot of people are just like, when they're buying something, do I actually need an attorney?
Yeah, because I mean, to be fair, when you're a buyer, there are lots of costs that fall on you, especially if you're buying with a mortgage. So, you know, some persons will say, okay, where can I cut? Maybe I should cut the attorney. But I want to say, and not because I'm being biased, that an attorney is so important, especially depending on the type of property that you're buying.
I cannot.
You know, exactly, because hardly ever do you come across a situation where it's just like a vanilla, straightforward, no complications.
Right. There is always something.
Exactly. So it just helps so much to have an attorney there to guide you through the process. You know, it's one of the most expensive or big like investments that you ever make in your life. And so a good attorney is essential, and they will walk you through every step of the way, including your due diligence, reviewing the documentation,
right,
and things to look out for that, you know, could potentially derail the transaction.
Right. So you spoke about due diligence. What are some of the things that an attorney would help you look for?
Okay, so the first thing is that your attorney would assist you by doing a title pull on the property that you're interested in buying. So they could pull a copy of the title from the title's office to see, okay, is the person that wants to sell the property actually the owner?
Yeah. Does that happen often where sometimes it's not the person?
I mean, I haven't come across a barefaced incident of that, but it actually does happen. You hear the horror stories, right? So you want to make sure that the person that is selling it actually has the right to be selling it.
Absolutely.
Also, you want to look at that title, right, to see, okay, are there any restrictions? We call them restrictive covenants that this property is subject to.
Right.
So, you know, for example, if you know that you want to buy a property to do a development and the title has a restrictive covenant on there that says single family, private dwelling only, you might be like, oh geez, okay, so there's a covenant on here that might prevent me from doing what I want to do with the property. So maybe I need to figure out how do I deal with that. And your lawyer can give you advice on that. You might be able to modify the covenants and, you know, a lot of different things. So that's the value that an attorney can bring to the transaction.
Okay. So I know that there are different types of ownership. And I'm not sure lots of people are fully aware of those. Could you just kind of walk us through what that looks like?
Right. So if you're buying the property in and of your own right, so you're going to put your name on the title, and you may be purchasing with somebody else, you might say, okay, well, are we going to own together as joint tenants or tenants in common?
And what's the difference?
So joint tenants is very typical in like a husband and wife situation. Why? Because the right of survivorship applies. What is that? Basically, if we're husband and wife and we're joint tenants on a title, whoever passes away first, the entirety of the property passes to the survivor, which is why we call it the right of survivorship. You don't have to probate their will. It's not part of their estate under their will. You can just go straight. It's just a quick process with the title office, pay some death duties, and we're good to go.
Fantastic.
Whereas the other option, which is tenants in common, you both own separate and distinct shares in that property. So I might own a half, you might own a half. I can leave that half under my will. You can leave your half under your will. So if your friend's purchasing, or if your brother and sister, something like that, maybe you might want it tenants in common.
And if you have tenants in common, you'll also be able to sell your house,
yes,
or sell your shares.
Correct, right? And you mentioning shares, you could also maybe consider, do you want to own the property in your own name, or is it that maybe you want to look at incorporating a holding company for that property for whatever reason,
right.
Especially if you're looking for it as an income generating property, or you're looking to do a development on it, it might be good to put it in the name of a company that your attorney can help you to
That's
set up.
wonderful.
Right.
So after you've discovered the property and you've done your due diligence and you've had you figured out how you want to do the ownership, everything, what's the next step?
So one, when you're going to make an offer on the property, it's important to know, okay, what terms are you purchasing it on though?
Right.
How quickly can you close that purchase? So if it's a cash sale, you might be saying, okay, I can close this cash sale maybe 45 days. If it's a mortgage sale, maybe you might want to be asking for like 90 or 120 days. If there's a tenant, you want them to take the tenant out so that you can get it with vacant possession. Things like that. You want to make sure your offer form has all of those things in it, all of your information, and that will allow the attorneys involved in the transaction to do the documentation as quickly as possible.
Okay,
right?
that sounds good.
And then you go into the documentation of the actual sale. So you'll be signing your sale agreements and going through the notions of getting the different things you need to get together to prepare yourself for completion of the sale.
Right. And what are some of the costs that we could be looking at?
Right. So buyers' closing costs. What do they generally include? Well, you have your attorney's fees. You also have your share of the registration fees. Registration fees on a sale transaction right now is at 0.5%. So the buyer generally splits that evenly with the seller. So you'd be looking at 0.25% in registration fees. Stamp duty luckily has come down quite a bit. So we just pay a flat fee of 2,500 Jamaican dollars on stamp duty. And then aside from that, you might have to contribute to the preparation of the legal fees for the agreement for sale, or the legal fees for the letters of possession.
As a buyer, what is the consideration in relation to transfer tax?
So as a buyer, you generally are not responsible for transfer tax.
Okay.
Right? There are some circumstances where a seller may negotiate that you should reimburse the transfer tax to them as a part of the deal, but generally speaking, the seller is responsible for transfer tax. And then, of course, if you're buying with a mortgage, I have to also let you be aware that your mortgage would also have some closing costs to take into consideration.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so you have like bank processing fees, which you should always ask for discount on, bank processing fees, survey ID report fees,
yes,
and valuation report fees, because you need these documentation generally to be able to apply for the mortgage and get approved.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
And then after you've done this and you've closed everything and you're just like, I'm almost at the end of this process, what is next?
So what is next is that you take possession, right? So generally speaking, once the funds are dispersed and they confirm that all of the funds have been paid up, the attorneys and or the realtors involved in the transaction will arrange for you to get possession of the property. If it is that, for example, it's a new construction property, it's very, very important to go and do a walkthrough. Right? If you can take like a contractor or an
yes,
engineer or somebody that is familiar with like handiwork to go through the place with you to see if there are any defects.
Right.
Right? That's very important if you're buying a new build property. So that you can bring it to their attention, because generally in those circumstances, you would be covered, those defects would be covered by a defects liability clause.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And sort of when all of this is now done, what are your obligations after?
Ongoing obligations of owners. So After you finish buying, that's not it. It's not done there. You need to remember to do things like pay your property taxes every year. They become due on April 1st of each year.
Yes.
For the full financial year going around. You can also pay it quarterly if you like. You also want to secure that property, especially if it's vacant land. So, do you want to put up a little fence or visit the property from time to time to make sure that there are no squatters on it, right? Or informal settlers, as we would call them. So it's very, very important to maintain. You bought a piece of property, maintain it, bush it, keep it well, and make sure that you're keeping your property taxes up to date. And also, a lot of people don't appreciate that your water rates actually form a charge against the property. So you want to also make sure that you are paying that down, so that and checking for leaks if there's a water connection regularly, etc. Because you don't want that to get out of hand.
Right.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for sharing that wonderful guide about buying property. Do you have any closing words?
I think my closing thoughts would be, again, this is like such a huge investment. So it's so important to have the right advice when you're going through the process and work with the requisite professionals. Make sure that the professionals have the level of experience necessary to take you through the transaction. And don't skimp on your attorney at law. It's really, really important, and they can be, a saving grace if your transaction goes off the rails.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
If you found this information helpful, you can visit our website at www.ghrlegal.com to access this information in article form, along with many, many other legal subjects in Jamaica. If you like this episode of Law Street, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell and join us for more episodes. This show is for general discussion purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. If you would like legal advice, you should book a consultation with an attorney at law.